my work, I tell people, is focused on humanizing particularly Black, gifted, and otherwise neurodivergent experiences, but certainly humanizing all experiences of neurodivergent folks. I think it's incredibly important that these narratives be changed, particularly because, again, our rates of diagnosis, our rates of awareness and acceptance for these identities is increasing. And for those of us who have gone through late identification, which I did, I identified a couple of years ago. Until, and I was 41 years of my life not knowing about this piece of me. So for those of us who know what it's like to kind of have an identity like that dropped on you late in life, you know that there is care that's needed. It's not just like, oh, I've got a new set of letters or whatever to put behind my name. It's, oh, my entire world has changed. How I see myself has changed. The stories of my life that I reflect on have changed. And so, again, my work is very much rooted in through sharing my story and those of others to help to make sure that people understand that these aren't labels that separate us. You may be able to see it in my background. I have one of my key mantras is that labels don't have to feel like pathology, right? Because, for me, giftedness, or for those who are autistic, those who are schizophrenic, whatever it is, those labels go beyond what you might see in some medical manual. They go into the lived experience. And so that's what, again, is my purpose, is to make sure that folks can see their humanity in my work. The systems have made us believe that there are only bad things, that there's only brokenness to be found in these labels. And so instead of that being the only framing that we have, we should be able to accept that we are, again, whatever the label is, because until we do, we can never live freely or feel the love that we really deserve, because we're always kind of like, maybe I have ADHD, but if I can't feel my humanity and my self-love in it, I'm always like hiding it in some way, or I'm always beating myself up for even having that label, as opposed to accepting it as a natural part of the human existence and being able to appreciate what I call the cape and the kryptonite of it all. One of the things I talk about is that my gifted self-discovery journey was in part about looking at the things that were making me angry, the things that I was scared of, the things that I felt deeply pained by, and going in there and investigating on a whole new level, like, what's really happening here? Because outside of these things, I'm in a really good space, but these things for some reason are really challenging. And so I 100% was not looking for giftedness when I found it. I was just looking to improve my relationships, improve my career, because I just felt like in all these cases, I was hitting this like ceiling that I couldn't get past. And so through that investigation, you know, I joked that, like, my therapist, I kept talking about, again, all these things I was discovering about understanding other people, which is something I'm really, really good at. But he just kept holding up a mirror and saying, okay, that's cool, they're hurt, but like, who is also hurt? And at first I'm like, I came to finally be able to see myself in the mirror and realize I was hurt. I wasn't acknowledging myself, my brilliance, my need for depth and complexity, my need for, all these things that I before was like beating myself down about, or that I was allowing other people to put on me, to project on me, and then I was internalizing, completely flipped. Because just for example, talking about even my level of empathy, before it was this thing of you're too sensitive. And that was, what do you mean? How can I be too sensitive?
Right.
Why is that? But instead of, it never turned into an actual answer to that question. What it became was, oh, wait, I have a level of insight that most people don't. And if that is true, that gives me access to, and this is the cape, right? This gives me access to, when certain people walk into a room, I already know something's up and I can check in on them, right? I'm somebody who can deliver a level of care and safety, right, and compassion that is extraordinary, right? And the kryptonite is also sometimes because people don't necessarily have the capacity, or some people don't have the ability to sit with those emotions, either mine or theirs. It can be something that can rub people the wrong way because they're trying to push you back. Oh, I can't deal with that. And so being able to have that clarity activated me to say, one, this is going to transform my life. And then I realized, wait a second, if I went 41 years of my life without knowing this, how many other people out there are challenged in their relationships, challenged in their career, challenged in their life that have absolutely no idea? I need to be out here helping to, pull back that veil for people and doing it again, not because, again, if you had told me, it's not like the first time I heard the word gifted, right? But in humanizing the experience, all of a sudden it went from, oh, you have to be the person who is, Nobel Peace Prize or, the prize winning scientist or whatever.
Yeah.
You've got to have all the accolades, all the titles, to there's a depth of complexity and a curiosity. There's a way of being that's there that resonates with me. The last thing I'll say very quickly is it was when I was reading a book called Living with Intensity that the floodgates ripped open. Because again, at the time I wasn't looking for giftedness, but when the book was talking about these intense experiences or, what they call overexcitabilities, and you all can check out the book on the side. I'd advise it if you're at least neuro curious. But talking about these excitabilities, it was like, yo, did you have a camera in my house? Like, what's going on? Right? So that is where, again, these humanizing experiences broke it open. And so that's my goal, is to continue to do that further. I kind of am the people's platypus. And what I mean by that is my work is for the people. But the key part of it is that a platypus reminds you that these categories that we have are constructs, right? Because the platypus is like, wait a second, like, look, if you're a mammal, you got to follow the rules. What are you doing? A mammal is this, right? You know what I mean? Like, but the platypus is like, dude, I'm me. I'm living. These constructs that you have cannot limit me. I'm not a figment of anybody's imagination. I'm tangible. And so things that help me do that same thing, expand my mind to, one, see other people, but also realize that, again, a lot of how I'm showing up, and going back to what we talked about earlier of, people being like, oh, that's too much for me. And realizing, reframing what that was, is that it wasn't speaking about me. It was speaking about people's ability to recognize and detach from those constructs. But funny enough, one of the things that some people have made me believe that I shouldn't be using is my voice. And now I get to lean 100% into this voice that I've come to assert is one that needs to be heard. And again, not from a place of arrogance, but from I see what happens when I hold space with people. And to that end, I'm adding into my work, not just the speaking, I will be working with folks to coach and consult as they begin that journey, right? And so those are the times when, like I said, I'm like, I unlocked this thing for this person, and all I was doing is just showing up as best I could.
This is Social Justice Origin Stories. I'm your host, Rolando Thompkins-Jones. Social Justice Origin Stories is a storytelling project that highlights personal stories and defining moments that have inspired individuals and organizations to labor for equity and social justice. Through truth-telling, the honest sharing of their experiences, storytellers teach us about themselves, enabling us to learn about ourselves and our world through their stories. By reconnecting with pivotal moments of activation in their lives, they invite us to do the same. At Social Justice Origin Stories, we believe that there's power in storytelling, and lived experience is experience. There's room enough for all of us to do this work. There are many ways to contribute, and our contributions don't need to be the same. We can enter and remain engaged in the work using the gifts that are special to us while supporting others and using theirs. We have the capacity to grow and change for the better when exposed to new information and experiences. We believe in our inherent worth and capabilities, and we possess the power to inspire and create change within ourselves and others. We can transcend the confines of the status quo to imagine and design more equitable and humanizing systems. Thank you all for joining us today. We are joined by Sheldon Gay. We were having a conversation even before we pressed record. I'm so glad you decided to come on and share your social justice origin story. One of the ways I found Sheldon, because some of you all know the storytelling of this, I started off asking folks that I knew to come and share, and now I'm reaching out and making new connections, and it's been really great. And so I found Sheldon in a roundabout kind of way. So there's this other content creator whose name is Nicholas Young, who, while I was on social media, one day I came across a reel that he did, and he was talking to folks who were in the gifted and talented classes coming up and connected being gifted and talented with being a form of disability. And one of the things that I appreciated about his framing of that as a gifted and talented kid growing up myself was what he talked about in terms of it being important to find places that were affirming of how your brain works, that were affirming of how you take in information, how you respond to different things, of your needs. And so I can remember at that time, like, oh, wow, I really appreciate his framing here. I'm always checking on my other fellow gifted and talented people in my life. And even those who I don't know. Hey, how y'all doing? Y'all all right out there? How my fellow gifted and talented folks doing? And so I just kind of saved it and filed it away. And I was on another social media app and I saw a post from Sheldon that came up and clicked on the post. I'm a fellow creator myself. So I, started going through, looking through Sheldon's information, seeing the work he's doing around supporting neurodivergent Black people. And one, I was so affirmed and inspired by it. But then also, I saw that Sheldon also had a YouTube channel. So I clicked on that, looked on the YouTube channel. And the guest of the episode that I looked at from Sheldon's podcast was Nicholas Young. And I was like, wow, this is the same person I was just looking at the other day. And then, here I am seeing Sheldon here talking. And so I just had to reach out. I wanted just to compliment and send some solidarity to Sheldon, but then also realizing it would be really incredible if Sheldon came to share some of his social justice origin stories with us. And so, again, thank you for being here. Really happy to have the conversation.
I also wanted to affirm you because I've watched some of the clips, but then I've also watched a few of the videos. And so I believe I think you said Quincy. I'm bad with names, but I believe that was the one that I watched where he was talking about anime and manga. Okay, so I watched that one. There's one in particular that really resonated that I watched, which was the one with Dr. Monique Alicia Gamble.
Yeah.
That was for a couple of different reasons, but it was just super, super resonant. So again, your work and the way that you're bringing these discussions into the space, and again, discussions, not like, you got the hot lamp over people like trying to, right? But yeah, man, I'm on the same page so far as the work being done everywhere in small and large ways and making sure that people know about it. Because even as you started talking about at the beginning, there's so much more media that is focused on the things that will make us hopeless.
Mm-hmm.
But seeing and knowing that there are people doing work, seeing and knowing that there are people who care, seeing and knowing that there are people just like me, maybe down the street from where I'm at, right? Like that keeps us going. This is an amazing project and I'm honored to be here.
Absolutely. I echo that. Honored to be talking to you.
Thank you. Thank you again for the invitation. This is an honor anytime that I get to share my story and also just converse with, someone that gets it, right? And that is aligned particularly around the support, affirmation, and work of what I call melanated and marginalized people. That is, sign me up, right? So thank you. For those that don't know, to tell you a little bit more about me, my name is Sheldon Gay. I use pronouns he and him. And I'll give you a description, which I typically do at the beginning of my podcast for those that know. I am a Black man in my 40s with light brown skin. I have black curly hair. It's faded on the sides and the back. I have a mustache, a little tuft of hair on my chin I call a goatee. My black over-ear headphones are on. I have on a shirt of my design, which you probably can't see the full thing, but it says decolonize your mind. So that's a description of myself. My work, I tell people, I have a podcast called I Must Be Buggin', where the buggin' is BUGN. It stands for Black, Unidentified, Underrepresented, Gifted, and Otherwise Neurodivergent. And that work, along with my speaking, is focused on humanizing particularly Black, gifted, and otherwise neurodivergent experiences, but certainly humanizing all experiences of neurodivergent folks. I think it's incredibly important that these narratives be changed, particularly because, again, in melanated and marginalized spaces, our rates of diagnosis, our rates of awareness and acceptance for these identities is increasing. And for those of us who have gone through late identification, which I did, I identified a couple of years ago. And so, and I was 41 years of my life not knowing about this piece of me. So for those of us who know what it's like to kind of have an identity like that dropped on you late in life, you know that there is care that's needed. It's not just like, oh, I've got a new set of letters or whatever to put behind my name. It's, oh, my entire world has changed. How I see myself has changed. The stories of my life that I reflect on have changed. And so, again, my work is very much rooted in through sharing my story and those of others to help to make sure that people understand that these aren't labels that separate us. You may be able to see it in my background. I have one of my key mantras is that labels don't have to feel like pathology, right? Because, for me, giftedness, or for those who are autistic, those who are schizophrenic, whatever it is, those labels go beyond what you might see in some medical manual. They go into the lived experience. And so that's what, again, is my purpose, is to make sure that folks can see their humanity in my work. And so yeah, that's a little bit about me.
You said labels don't have to feel pathological.
Labels don't have to feel like pathology.
Okay.
Yes. And yeah, and I love that, I love that I came to that framing, because what I sense, and to tell you a little bit about kind of where that came from, is that a lot of folks, and again, particularly in melanated and marginalized spaces, they're very worried about kind of adding another, marginalized identity on top of themselves. And they're worried about, again, the systems have made us believe that there are only bad things, that there's only brokenness to be found in these labels. And so instead of that being the only framing that we have, we should be able to accept that we are, again, whatever the label is, because until we do, we can never live freely or feel the love that we really deserve, because we're always kind of like, maybe I have ADHD, but if I can't feel my humanity and my self-love in it, I'm always like hiding it in some way, or I'm always beating myself up for even having that label, as opposed to accepting it as a natural part of the human existence and being able to appreciate what I call the cape and the kryptonite of it all.
Cape and the kryptonite.
Yeah.
That. Yeah, and it just makes me think, like, a part of social justice origin stories too is rooted in the belief that social justice education can be liberatory, and so understanding different points of language can be liberatory, and that, like, now, perhaps somebody was moving throughout life with some feelings that they couldn't name, and then here comes, just through storytelling, hey, someone's provided you with some language, and it's like, oh, wait, it's not necessarily about trying to fix something, but it's like, if I can understand myself better, if I can understand what needs I have, what support, like how I best operate, yeah, that's very liberatory. I appreciate how you shared that. So
Yeah.
to get us started, I'll use this quote from Corey Bush, which says, many of us do not choose to become activists. Instead, we are activated. And so what are some things that activated you?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm actually somewhat revisiting it, outside of this conversation, because I'm working on my new season for my podcast, and I'll give you all a little bit of an insight. The episode that I'm currently finalizing is one where I talk about how anger can help us access joy. And one of the things I talk about in there is that my gifted self-discovery journey was in part about looking at the things that were making me angry, the things that I was scared of, the things that I felt deeply pained by, and going in there and investigating on a whole new level, like, what's really happening here? Because outside of these things, I'm in a really good space, but these things for some reason are really challenging. And so I 100% was not looking for giftedness when I found it. I was just looking to improve my relationships, improve my career, because I just felt like in all these cases, I was hitting this like ceiling that I couldn't get past. And so through that investigation, I joked that, like, my therapist, I kept talking about, again, all these things I was discovering about understanding other people, which is something I'm really, really good at. But he just kept holding up a mirror and saying, okay, that's cool, they're hurt, but like, who is also hurt? And at first I'm like, I came to finally be able to see myself in the mirror and realize I was hurt. I wasn't acknowledging myself, my brilliance, my need for depth and complexity, my need for, all these things that I before was like beating myself down about, or that I was allowing other people to put on me, to project on me, and then I was internalizing, completely flipped. Because just for example, talking about even my level of empathy, before it was this thing of you're too sensitive. And that was, what do you mean? How can I be too sensitive?
Right.
Why is that? But instead of, it never turned into an actual answer to that question. What it became was, oh, wait, I have a level of insight that most people don't. And if that is true, that gives me access to, and this is the cape, right? This gives me access to when certain people walk into a room, I already know something's up and I can check in on them, right? I'm somebody who can deliver a level of care and safety, right? And compassion that is extraordinary, right? And the kryptonite is also sometimes because people don't necessarily have the capacity, or some people don't have the ability to sit with those emotions, either mine or theirs. It can be something that can rub people the wrong way because they're trying to push you back. Oh, I can't deal with that. And so being able to have that clarity activated me to say, one, this is going to transform my life. And then I realized, wait a second, if I went 41 years of my life without knowing this, how many other people out there are challenged in their relationships, challenged in their career, challenged in their life, that have absolutely no idea? I need to be out here helping to, pull back that veil for people, and doing it again, not because, again, if you had told me, it's not like the first time I heard the word gifted, right? But in humanizing the experience, all of a sudden it went from, oh, you have to be the person who is, Nobel Peace Prize, or, the prize winning scientist or whatever.
Yeah.
You've got to have all the accolades, all the titles, to there's a depth of complexity and a curiosity. There's a way of being that's there that resonates with me. The last thing I'll say very quickly is, it was when I was reading a book called Living with Intensity that the floodgates ripped open. Because again, at the time I wasn't looking for giftedness, but when the book was talking about these intense experiences, or, what they call overexcitabilities, and you all can check out the book on the side. I'd advise it if you're at least neuro curious. But talking about these excitabilities, it was like, yo, did you have a camera in my house? Like, what's going on? Right? So that is where, again, these humanizing experiences broke it open. And so that's my goal, is to continue to do that for others.
Yeah, to do that for other people. I liked in your story, you did some reframing too. It's like, okay, so at some instances hearing like too sensitive, but then also, wait a minute, that means I have insight, What are some things that helped you to be able to do that reframe? Because I'm listening to your story and I'm imagining it's like, okay, yeah, you got the insight. You could see, you got the empathy, you can pick up on certain things. And then also you talked about how some people are like, nope, not trying to. What I was reading and listening to in that, and just thinking about my own life experiences, like, well, it's not that deep, or I'm not trying to go that deep right now. I'm not trying to think about this right now. Like, why are you always saying, why are you always pointing this stuff out? Like, what, so what were, what were some of the things for you that helped you to begin to start to reframe that? Too sensitive, actually, no, that means I have a deeper insight, so what were some of the things that helped you to do that?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, I had an amazing therapist who was able to hold that space and to understand me. Honestly, before that, I ran into several therapists who didn't understand it. Let me be very clear about naming that as well, because I know that was a big challenge. A lot of previous therapists were pathologizing, right? And that is definitely a challenge in general, but certainly for Black, gifted, and otherwise neurodivergent people, is that, again, how we show up in spaces. People want to turn into this pathology, but it never sat well with me. But I was like, well, I guess this is the therapist. Like, let me be open to it. But my therapist was, again, one of the first people, was like, I want you to see, what does that mean for you? And so the therapy, but also, I mean, frankly, using this, this mind that loves analogies, right? And saying, okay, I mean, I've done work in different spaces, and I'll just say that one of the things that has taken different forms, but it's like kind of the consistent underlying message is, look at your shadow thoughts, right? And then ask yourself, what's the empowering way, right? How do I look at that and say, okay, in a simple way, like, people have heard this before, right? It's like people who think, what if everything goes wrong? And they say, well, what if it went right?
Yeah.
And so I took time and, like, literally wrote out a whole bunch of stuff. And it was like, okay, here's a truth but then what's the other side of this? And doing that, that opened up my mind to be able to say, you know what? Yeah, some people, it might be too much for them. And, the last thing I'll say really quickly is this brings me to one of my other like mantras, which is know when to wear your hoodie. And if you haven't heard me say that before, in short, it's this mentality that, I think a lot of times when we show up in places and we have these different identities, we have these different characteristics that we hold dear, we feel like the space is telling us we have to completely get rid of it. And what I say is know when to wear your hoodie. If it was 100 degrees outside, I'm probably not wearing my hoodie, but I can take my hoodie off and put it in my car or keep it on my arm, because as soon as this, fall, spring, whatever, I can throw that hoodie on and I have it with me. And so, but knowing the space that I'm in and saying, okay, this space, they can't take all of that. And I don't have to feel like I'm cutting a part of me out. I just know that I got to take my hoodie off. And that's really the way that I think about it.
Yeah. And I'm listening to your story, and as you're describing that, you talked about that mind of yours, your mind, you love analogies and that. And I'm thinking like, yeah, that taps into that side that's very self-reflective and very self-aware. So you're to know when to wear your hoodie. So what I'm reading from that in some ways is like, there's this element of also being in touch with yourself and having some sense of agency over, hey, this is where I need this is where I don't. Appreciate you sharing that. You had an experience and learning about your giftedness has opened up this whole new world. And now you're wanting to support others in having similar experiences, getting to know themselves in ways that they knew, but perhaps couldn't name before, right? And so you're an advocate for neurodiversity. You've created I Must Be Bugging. And you know what I appreciate about that is it's like, one, I appreciate just the name and just the culture that's there. But then I also appreciate the intention, because every letter in that bugging is very intentional. And so my question there is, how did the title come to you? How did the name come to you? How did you sort of formulate that? Because yeah, I'm just, hey, I must be bug is for me, I appreciate it's cultural. Then also, though, it is very much in line with the advocacy work that you do. So it's like, how did you, come to
That's
that as a name? How did that come to you?
so I love this question because I don't get to necessarily tell it in this way all the time, but it's like an insight into my mind. So when I decided that I was going to do the podcast, I was thinking about all different kinds of names. And, I love a good pun. I love a good, I love wordplay. Honestly, what happened was I was asleep. Before I went to sleep, I set an intention. I was like, I wanted to have, like I said, I want to have this cultural element. I wanted to spark curiosity. I had these different pieces that I was like, this is what I want. In the middle of the night, in the part of my dream, it came to me. It like these letters, I promise you, like these letters came to me in the line, and I was like, oh shoot.
Oh,
And I immediately wrote it down. And that's sometimes how my mind works. And even to go back a little bit into your question as well, talking about this realization of this new world, but also this reflection upon my lived experience to date. I tell people that now all of my old memories prior to are really like two memories, because I have my original way of framing, but then I also have a new understanding. And so I know that, even to the like wordplay thing, one of the things that I remember someone saying to me is like, taking my kind of quick wit as more teasing than it's just playing around. And so if I share a little quip like that's not me. It's not really even about you. It's about like my mind is loving to play around and like finding a cool little way of saying something
yeah.
and wanting to share it. And so, like I said, that's really how it came to be, was that I set some intentionality around it, but I just let my mind do its thing, and it presented, and I was like, "Oh, wait, that works. That works real well." So, yeah.
I love how that came together. And I'll even say, even with the colors, now I don't know if this is intended or not. So you can say, oh yeah, this wasn't even what I was thinking about. But the colors, there's a certain vibrancy to it. And honestly too, and I don't know if this is where we landed with you, at least initially how it landed with me too. It's like, there's this vibrancy to it, but then it was also like, it took me to this very like kind of Renaissance kind of era of like the 90s when like you had the, people were wearing the college t-shirts and the, just trying to subtly and overtly pushing education. It's a very different, certain shows and stuff. It's very that I think were intended in some ways to give Black folks in particular a particular vision of possibility that was different than what we had been accustomed to seeing or have had access to see in those messages getting through in different ways. And so I was like, yeah, it's a lot. And then the name Bugging too, it just took me back in some really good ways. And I was like, oh man, this is just so cool. It's so cool how you did that. I don't know if any of that came through when you were designing any of the stuff, but I was like, yeah, it kind of takes me back when you put my college hoodie on or whatnot, or my gear or whatnot. So it took me back in some good ways.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that and for asking the question. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely that in there, right? Like the short story it is definitely meant to spark joy, spark curiosity, to be divergent unto itself, right? It's not this sort of very buttoned down branding. It's also meant to have Pan-African flag because it's got the red, the black, the yellow, right? And I toned down the greenish blue, but that was, again, just to make it a little bit softer, more playful. But everything that you're talking about, 100% is built into the brand. And it's funny too, because I've had some people who have been like, oh, it's too playful, particularly as I start to do more speaking, right? People are like, oh, I don't know. And I'm like, listen, this is who I am. If that doesn't fit their thing, if that's too much of a stretch, my conversation with their people is not going to work anyway, because I'm not here to be Mr. Buttoned Up. I'm not here to be the types of discussions that you can find just about anywhere on the internet as it relates to neurodivergence. That's just not my vibe. No shots really to anybody who does that, but that's not Sheldon. I wouldn't be authentic Sheldon if I was doing that.
I appreciate that. And that's a part of it too. Every story is different with social justice origin stories, and the message, it's going to land with the folks that it resonates with. Sometimes I'll talk with folks about growing up, and I grew up in the city of Detroit, born and raised, Detroit Public Schools, graduate. Some summers I would go down south and spend time with my grandparents in Valdosta, Georgia, Lowndes County, which has its own history when it comes to social justice and injustice. My grandfather would talk to me about, we would sit under the carport in a rocking chair sometimes.
Yeah, I hear you.
In the morning, we read the paper, and sometimes at night, we just, sit there watching, and my granddad would tell me these stories. But then what I'm getting at here is he would see light bugs. So I grew up calling them light bugs. Some people call them fireflies. Some people call them something else. But what he would always point out to me is like each of them have a different flash to them, and when they're doing that, they're trying to communicate with ones that resonate with that. So I feel like I appreciated your messaging around like, no, that's not who I am. And again, no disrespect to folks who are like that, but that's not the message that I'm trying to communicate. So it's just, for me, just affirming when we create art, when we speak, when we do things, we're reaching out to those folks that it resonates with. For me, it very much does. I love the colors. I love the design. It takes me back again to this time where it's like a lot of, I talk to librarians as a part of the social justice origin story. Sometimes being a librarian, seeing like a LeVar Burton on a Reed poster, growing up with that. It's very much this like this era of possibility and pouring in positivity and encouragement. So I appreciate you sharing a little bit behind the story. Is there a time in your work, as you do the podcast, you do speaking and things, is there a moment or a memory, and it can be moments, or even if it's not a specific thing, it could be a feeling, something you notice where you're engaged in your advocacy work and you were kind of reminded of like, yeah, this is exactly why I do this work. Like where I'm feeling like what I'm doing right now is the right thing for me. If some people call it zones of genius, I'm using my gifts here and I'm in the right place at the right time.
Yeah. So thank you for asking this question, because it's really important that I share this piece. And to take you back a little bit, one of my challenges of discovering the things that I had to reframe was that in my life, I've lived a lot of career lives. I've worked in healthcare, retail sales, education, tech, and engineering. I have my undergrad engineering degree. I've lived many different lives. And up until that point, to other people especially, it seemed like I just couldn't nail something down. And that I was just, whatever, like just all over the place. It didn't necessarily feel that way to me, but, as I got to this discovery, I was running a business, which technically I still run. It's called Takano Solutions. I help people build apps, websites, and other software with a particular focus on making sure that it's equitable for melanated and marginalized communities. So again, at that point, I was thinking, okay, this is going to be my thing. I left my corporate job to do that. And this new discovery came along and it's completely shifted my work. This is now my priority. And so this brings me to the ultimate question of like, what's a time when I realized what I was doing is kind of my thing? That context was to say, all that time, I felt like there was still something missing. Like I mean, literally before this call, I was on a call that was related to equitable tech work that I'm doing, but like there was always still a piece that was missing. I say that my purpose in life is to leverage technology to create a more equitable, just, and joyous world. And so, you know, anytime as it's happened recently where people are reaching out and saying, hey, I heard you on this podcast, or I heard your thing. I just discovered I was gifted, or I just discovered whatever. And I loved the way that you talked about it. I've not heard someone speak about it in this way. And then we end up having like these really deep discussions. Most of the time they want to get on a call and they want to sit on a call with me for a couple of hours, like just chopping it up. And those are the moments. I mean, there are so many, but those are like core moments where I'm like, without me being out there, this person would be just wandering the wilderness by themselves. And this work that I do now, I'm still leveraging technology. There's still plenty of equity and justice in the work that I'm doing. But funny enough, one of the things that some people have made me believe that I shouldn't be using is my voice. And now I get to lean 100% into this voice that I've come to assert is one that needs to be heard. And again, not from a place of arrogance, but from I see what happens when I hold space with people. And to that end, I'm adding into my work, not just the speaking, I will be working with folks to coach and consult as they begin that journey, right? And so those are times when, like I said, I'm like, I unlocked this thing for this person, and all I was doing is just showing up as best I could.
See, messages like that, experiences like that, moments like that, that's just another area where it just aligns so deeply with the purpose of social justice origin stories. One of the purposes of this. I mean, honestly, oppression is a systemic, it's in a lot of places, and folks can feel isolated. It can be a real cold place for a lot of people, but then we find visibility, we can find connection, affirmation in storytelling and hearing someone share their experiences. And we're talking about this before we started recording too. Not creating something that didn't exist, not pulling something from nowhere, but just sharing their personal experiences can really support folks in feeling less alone. I really appreciate you sharing that memory. And also the added part about, yeah, I've actually had folks who've told me the one thing that I shouldn't use is my voice. And you've seen the power of that storytelling. Like, I'm using my voice and I know the impact. I know, and so I'm going to keep doing this. So I appreciate you sharing that. So backing up just a little bit, technology. When did technology become an important focus for you too?
So, okay, this is actually kind of a funny story that I'll try to tell as quickly as possible. But like, if you had asked me when I was 13 whether or not I would be involved with any kind of technology, I would have laughed and told you absolutely not. In fact, the funny story is when I went to high school, I went to this boarding school and they had like a computer room. And I remember my mom being like, yo, you need to get in there on those computers. At the time, I'm like, computers? And I told her, it was like, the computers are for geeks. I was like, why would I be on these computers? I spent a lot of time in the computer lab, but even as I left high school, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was like, I'm good at math, I'm good at science, but what do I really want to do? I didn't even know at the time, literally. And again, this boarding school is a pretty prestigious one. I still didn't know what an engineer was, to the point where, again, funny mom story. My mom was like, hey, I got this friend who's a chemical engineer. I think you'd really like it. You should look into it. At the time, the only thing I knew about an engineer was somebody who drove trains. And so I was like, Mom, what? Like, have I ever like drive trains? And what do you expect? And again, literally, Yeah, exactly. Like, what do you mean? But I did end up looking into it and I was like, oh, wait, hold on now. And so I ended up getting my undergrad in mechanical engineering. And that allowed me to do a lot of things. And what I realized before I left, though, is as well, like, I love technology. I love envisioning what technology can do, particularly as it relates to making sure that the use of technology is not negatively impacting communities or that it is empowering communities. And so that led me to pursue a tech focused MBA because what I wanted to do was say, okay, I want to be in these boardrooms. I want to be in these meetings where people are, what's relevant today, right? See people talking about AI, and AI is cool and all, but there are ways in which certain types of AI are simply perpetuating all the systems of oppression that we're already fighting,
Yeah.
and in fact exacerbating them, right? And so I want to be one of those voices that is calling that out, that is building something that goes against that, right? Like that offers another path. And so, yeah, man, that's like I said, if you had asked me at 13, I would have laughed. And frankly, even now with the work that I do, because to be clear, I don't write code. I am what I basically call like a product manager for hire. And for those that don't know, that basically means that my clients come to me, I listen to their vision, right? What do they want to do? What's their big business vision? They don't know the technical side. Don't worry about that. Just tell me what it is that you want to do. And I distill that down. And then I go and talk to the engineers and say, hey, here's what from the technical side that it needs to do. I'm that person that can kind of play on both sides. But again, if you had told me that, several years before, I didn't even know that that was a type of role that you could have. I felt that you had to be on one side or the other. But then I was like, oh, you can do both. And this is the last story that I'll tell because it just popped in my head and I love telling this story.
Yeah.
It reminded me of when I was young. And for those who are old enough, or I guess they got to Ninja Turtles now today, but like when I was young and back when kids actually played outside, let me say it that way. No, I mean, kind of a shot to the young folks, but not really. But like, this is a little playful jab between friends. But like, when we used to play, you used to want to choose who you pretend to be. So it's like somebody like, oh, I want to be Raphael. I'm Michelangelo. And I always used to have a challenge with choosing between Leonardo and Donatello. And at the time, it didn't make any sense to me, or I didn't make any real connection. It wasn't until I got older and I realized, oh, you know why that is? Because Donatello was the technology, right? He was the gadget guy. And Leo was the leader. He was the visionary. And so I was always trying to marry the two, right? And that is a big part of, like I said, my life is marrying those two, of not just saying, okay, again, I just want to do the tech or I just want to lead. I want to marry the two. And so that's a story I always look back and laugh on because, like I said, little Sheldon would have had no idea what that would lead to.
Yeah. For folks out there who are listening and maybe at different places with that, I hope you find some liberation in recognizing that from this particular story, it's like, hey, doesn't always have to be either or. Sometimes, Sheldon, for some folks, and for me too, in different ways, sometimes having somebody just come along and say, wait a minute, why not both? It unlocks something. It can like, oh, wow, I didn't even know that was a possibility. I appreciate you sharing that story. And yeah, being a part, I too am in that generation of folks who probably among the last, I'll say, who grew up like,
Right.
Unstructured, make your own fun kind of stuff outside. And again, no disrespect
It's
to
all
the
it's
youth,
all love.
because I'm
It's,
sure
yeah,
you're
yeah.
doing it in your own ways, in different ways. I'm sure
Right,
you're
right, right,
doing it.
right,
It's
right.
just a different, but
Yeah.
yeah, I remember
Yeah.
that. Now I'm about to get into the back of I remember the old neighborhood. I'm about to go down that path. So who or what are some things that contributed to shaping the way you see the world and move through the world? Like that inform how you approach things. Like it could be mentors, it could be books, experiences, or other things that have been significant to your journey.
Yeah. I mean, I would say a key person is, God rest her soul, my grandmother, who influenced my mom and all of her children. But my grandmother, when I used to spend time with her, in Philly, her care, her level of compassion that just exceeded, I mean, it was just far and beyond. It was always about, I spoke at her funeral, and one of the things I said was about how it didn't matter, what your status was in life. It didn't matter what you had done. She would always find a way to still see and honor your humanity. And that meant, the world. As I have progressed and begun to read more and listen to things more and just really dig into the social justice work, certainly a name that I would be remiss if I didn't name, particularly because I often jokingly call myself a bell hooks evangelist, is bell hooks. I think that bell hooks work around love in particular, and love, understanding that love has no place for domination, no place for anyone to be dominated, right? This flipping on its head of what a lot of our, it's easy for justice movements to get caught up in this. We are disempowered. Now we want to be in power, and then put those other people kind of, and it's like, but that's just this cycle of domination, right? And so if we really want to be free, everyone has to be willing to say, I'm not here to dominate. I'm here to create equity. And so bell hooks, absolutely. I couldn't even tell you how many of her books I've read. Audre Lorde, I mean, in a similar way, but also I'm big on making sure that I am exposing myself to queer theory and other things, like things that go outside of my experience, right? To make sure that I'm being informed, and so that I'm growing, and that I'm even working on some stuff that are vestiges of socialization that I didn't even realize was there. I mean, again, so that brings in like people like Baldwin. I mean, so many different folks, right? Like I read a lot of these folks' different works. A word that came to me this morning that is related to all of this is I kind of want to be, or I kind of am the people's platypus. And what I mean by that is my work is for the people, but the key part of it is that a platypus reminds you that these categories that we have are constructs, right? Because the platypus is like, wait a second, like, look, if you're a mammal, you got to follow the rules. What are you doing? A mammal is this, right? You know what I mean? Like, but the platypus is like, dude, I'm me. I'm living. These constructs that you have cannot limit me. I'm not a figment of anybody's imagination. I'm tangible. And so things that help me do that same thing, expand my mind to, one, see other people, but also realize that, again, a lot of how I'm showing up, and going back to what we talked about earlier of, people being like, oh, that's too much for me. And realizing, reframing what that was, is that it wasn't speaking about me. It was speaking about people's ability to recognize and detach from those constructs. And so, so all the folks that help me do that, Maya Angelou, again, is somebody else who I'll say, for her love of authenticity and her calling to claim yourself, your identity. That's a big person I started to read a lot more of recently as well.
Yeah, when you talked about love having no place for domination. Now, that actually reminds me of what you said, and thinking about my friend, Dr. Monique Galicia Gamble, who also brought that into her social justice origin story as well. I'm just opening up some space now in terms of like, what would you say to them or about them to just speak to their impact and influence on you? And as you think about that, there's a variety of different reasons that comes to me. One very key reason, I think it's important to give folks their flowers and affirm them in the ways that we can. I can hear us. And I also think it's just a moment. I've done this myself. A part of even organizing and putting social justice origin stories together was kind of going through who some of those people were for me. And so there's that. There was one person I wanted to talk to before I even started recording these. One of my former social work professors, Dr. Lynetta Mosby, was key in introducing me to social work as a pathway. I'm a macro social worker, so I have a heavy focus on the ways the environment influences the experience of the person. I wanted to talk to her and just didn't get there in time. Some stuff happened. She got sick and passed away. In many ways, I honor her life and her contributions through this work that I'm doing. But it's just one of those things, giving those affirmations. And I found for some folks, it's a good opportunity to reflect in gratitude. And so it could be speaking to individuals. It can also be speaking broadly. I've had some people say, oh, you start naming people and I don't want to forget. However you would like to approach that in terms of speaking to that.
I can take a shot. I think if, if I were to even speak individually about it, everything that I would want to say to any one of the individuals I've already
Yeah.
named, it would be 5 episodes worth of stuff. But I would say broadly, and it's interesting that you should ask the question in this way because I have a vision board that I try to read every day. One of the slides in there is a slide which has bell hooks. It's got Audre Lorde, it's got Baldwin, it's got Toni Morrison, it's got Maya Angelou, it's got Dr. Ruha Benjamin, like super, super dope. It's got Huey P. It's got my friend Damian Patrick Williams, who you're not familiar with. He is one of the foremost experts on ethical AI, Black man. We went to elementary school
All
together.
right.
Amazing, amazing inspiration for me. I think I named everybody, right? But like that's on that slide, right? But the slide is about saying, hey, thank you for living how you did because you helped to affirm my experience. I know that I am not alone. I know that this gets in my feels because it's really, really critical for me to be reminded that there are other people who would understand my experience. And so every day I try to thank them and to honor them because on the flip side, their energy, wherever it may be in the universe, living or otherwise, to honor that, to say, I know that you had moments where you also looked out into the world and wondered if you were alone. And so I just want to maintain that connection and share that energy and have that resonance there. And so in some way, that is what I would say in a concise way, as concise as it can be. So
Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for going down that road with me. I appreciate it. Feeling less alone. There are these themes. I'm telling you, this is what it's about. You said, because you lived, I was able to feel a little bit less alone. And then it's also humanizing them too, because you may have also felt in a similar way, you know, looking at who can understand my experience, which in some ways you sharing that takes me back to what Nicholas Young has shared in terms of, hey, gifted and talented folks, it is important to find places, people, environments that are affirming to how you think, because you talked about a different kind of energy, right? You said, you know, to the world and the ways that it is just not affirming. I just love that because you lived, I was
Absolutely.
able to feel less alone. I appreciate you bringing that message to us for sure, for sure. So a part of social justice origin stories too is, you know, stories of resistance in a variety of different ways, resisting, internalizing the oppression that we experience, and then also resisting, internalizing those patterns of power and dominance and superiority from the messaging we get about our identities, where we have some privilege as well. What's your relationship with resisting both internalized oppression and then also internalizing that the world revolves around us for those particular identities that we have in your life?
Yeah. Yeah. I wish I were one of the people who could like rip off quotes, but there's a bell hooks quote that I use in one of my presentations that talks, again, going back to this thing of like, how do I, even with my marginalized experiences, not also become a dominator, right? And recognizing that that possibility is there. So that's like the first thing, is to recognize that it's possible that, you know, I know definitively when I go into certain Black spaces, there is homophobia, there is sexism, right? So we're like, oh, we're fighting for the Black people, but you know, or again, I don't know for those who are listening who may be able to see behind me, but like one of the books that I'm finishing up now is Black disability politics. And so again, right, like how are we not fighting for quote unquote our people by harming other people, by dominating other people? So I'm always asking that question. And in fact, what it reminds me of from my technical work is, for those, I mention this from time to time, if you're not familiar, there's it's called the tarot cards of tech. And so if you're not familiar, there's basically these tarot cards and you turn them over and they ask questions like, whose voice is not being heard? If this was used as intended, who might be harmed? If this was used as unintended, who might be harmed? So making sure that you're always asking these questions that, you know, again, you could be as focused and as a good intentioned or whatever, but making sure that you're always calling into the space, you know, those who even just in particular in that space may be marginalized. And I know, again, going forward as well, for me, one of the mantles that I'm taking up with my podcast is beyond talking about melanated and marginalized neurodivergent people, but talking to us as men, those who identify as men, and saying, hey, like, masculinity can look different.
Mm-hmm.
And again, even as a Black man, I may not be at the top of the pyramid, as it were, but that doesn't mean that I don't have some power and some privilege. And how do I, again, it's an interesting thing internally to feel that experience of being marginalized and the desire to be in power, and at the same time choosing to let go of the power, because you know that it means that, again, we have the entire community has access to the optimal equitable outcome. It can be very hard because, again, it's like when you're denied something for so long, to then have someone ask you to give up even a piece of that, it's a tough thing. You've got to do the work to be able to get there. So yeah, man, I'm always trying to plug in to places and things, again, that are helping me to make sure that I'm asking these kinds of questions and just become more aware. Again, even particularly as it relates to disability, I think a lot of us just don't think about disability, you know, and again, what does disability even mean? Like, it's not just somebody in a wheelchair, right?
Right.
And so anyway, that's, I guess, just trying to make sure that I'm being very, very mindful of that.
And I'm listening to you. I'm like, yeah. And also, the end goal is not to have the same kind of access to the stuff that the white guys have. It's like, no, that's not.
Oh yeah,
That's not the goal.
right.
That shouldn't be the goal, y'all. Appreciate you sharing that. What do you hope listeners will learn or take away from your story, and what actions would you encourage them to take?
What I hope that people take away, and is the core of my work, is to love yourself, love your full self completely before you worry about anything else. Love yourself. Know that, again, although Superman has a cape, Superman also has kryptonite, and that's okay because Superman is still amazing, right? And so you don't have to deny any part of yourself that may be, marginalized by the environment, or may just be difficult. I struggle, I don't know if I mentioned it, like my brain, I know, does not hold on to names well. It's much more of a very spatially organized mind. I can still love myself in that. I can own that. I can speak to that without having to hide from it or feel any shame around it. And I think that's where a lot of people, letting go of shame, right? To be able to love yourself fully and accept what it is, right? Because it gets to even talking about why people get defensive and lack accountability, which then ruins relationships. So, again, my thing is love yourself completely. And to that end, allow that to let you show up into your communities even better. And I think that where you might fall short, and this is a coding, analogy, which is that, when you write code, the idea isn't to try to, like, if you set out to just completely write perfect code, like it's a fool's errand. What is more important than trying to write perfect code is to make sure that you have systems in place that can readily identify bugs and that have a process for mitigating the harm to the larger system. And so in life, right, it's about making sure that I'm not trying to be perfect in community. What I'm trying to do is show up as my best self. Where there is something that shows up that is a bug or a harm, be okay with that. And then use my systems for repair for myself and for those, again, I'm in community with, to then go from there. And I think, again, if we let go of this idea that we have to be perfect and that any kind of quote unquote bug in the system is like the ultimate end of the world, I think that we're not able to access our full joy. And so, in whatever way you want to frame your system, loving yourself first is the key part of that, because you can't even show up in a way that allows you to fully love others if you don't first love yourself.
True social justice is possible when?
True social justice is possible when we detach from our identities that are based in all the systems of oppression. True social justice is possible when we are willing to do the work to recognize that everything outside of us is actually a part of us.
My approach to social justice is shaped by.
My approach to social justice is shaped by my desire for other people to know love deeply. I want for people to not long for love, to not despair in love, but to know all that comes with love at its deepest level before they transition to another plane. Because that is really all of what everybody is, all the material things comes back to wanting to feel love. And so if we can find that unto ourselves first, the rest is gravy.
Understanding and sharing our social justice origin stories is important because
It's important because it helps people know that they're not alone and that there are other people that they are doing the work with. That in community, we can carry the load. No one has to do this alone. And so sharing these stories helps people remember that there's hope and that there are others that are aligned in creating a better world.
now it's been my sincere hope that our stories, our sharing will outlast us. And so for future generations who would come across this recording, is there anything you'd like to share with them? Anything you'd like to pass on to them? Anything you'd like them to know?
One of my key messages for both people who interact with our future, the youth, and for those who are the youth of today or the future, is that you are fully human. We tend to treat young folks as if they are a separate category of human. Your humanity is already complete. Your value is already complete. You already deserve to have all of you recognized and honored. And if you can do that, again, for yourself, I promise you that your future will outstrip everything that not only your ancestors imagined, but that you have imagined. And that is what will make the future a better place.
And to that, I say thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you for sharing with us. Thank you for being here with me. Thank you for contributing your story and adding your voice to the collective stories that we're sharing here. Thank you so much. I just appreciate it. Sheldon Gay, everybody. Sheldon Gay.
Definitely, please stay in touch. Seriously, just one-on-one, man. Really love your work in any way that I can support, because this is the kind of stuff that is super important as we move forward. Like you said, there's so much stuff going on, and people need to be able to hear that folks haven't given up and that there's still important work being done. Thank you so much for the invite. Look forward to chatting in the future.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review and subscribe to Social Justice Origin Stories wherever you get your podcasts. You can also watch video episodes on YouTube at Social Justice Origin Stories, and I'd really appreciate it if you subscribe there as well. Video episodes are also available on the project website, socialjusticeoriginstories.com. I'd love to hear about how you're engaging with the stories. Share your thoughts at socialjusticeoriginstories.com/contact or by emailing stories@socialjusticeoriginstories.com. To support the work of Social Justice Origin Stories, consider becoming a monthly patron. Your contributions will help keep this resource going and support its mission. Visit patreon.com/social justice origin stories to learn more and to make a contribution. Again, that's patreon.com/social justice origin stories. You can start or stop anytime. Social Justice Origin Stories is edited, hosted, and produced by me, Rolando Thompkins-Jones. Many thanks to our storyteller this week and the many storytellers who have contributed to this project. And thank you for joining me this week. Take care.